right, well, I don't want to hold us too much longer, so I think we're going to go ahead and get started. I will go ahead and share my screen and we're going to kick it off. But thank you everybody for joining. I think some people will continue to trickle in. All right, here we go. All right, everyone, welcome again. My name's Brittany and I'm a field marketer at MongoDB, but most importantly, I get the pleasure of being a leader on our MongoDB Women's Group, which is who's sponsoring today's session. With this panel being to support and celebrate underrepresented groups, before we jump into today's events, I feel as though it would be dishonorable to not take a moment to recognize the loss and tribulation that has occurred in our Asian American communities this week. While we have all experienced loss and suffering in our own ways this year, our Black and Asian communities have been overtly affected. As a woman of neither descent, I don't have all the right things to say about what's gone on, but myself, all of those on this panel, and MongoDB see you and ache for all suffering. I hope you will now all join me in a quick moment of silence for the lives lost this week. Thank you. I must say the turnout for this event has been incredible. Originally, this was an event we planned to just have internally for our MongoDB Women's Group, but when going through the topics of conversation, we thought this needs to be a discussion that we have with more than just MongoDB. We are not the model child for underrepresented genders in technology, and what a fantastic way to lean in and learn while also allowing others to do the same. I know I've already seen great payoff from this event, either from people adding each other on LinkedIn and expanding their professional network, or having conversations on social media about how to keep this conversation going. I'm excited to see all that comes out of the event. Before we continue on the actual panel, I would like to go ahead and take a quick second to introduce our panelists themselves. First off, we have Amanda Hua. Amanda is the Director of Engineering at Rivian, an automotive technology company founded in 2009. Amanda is originally from Shanghai, is an extremely accomplished and beautiful ballet dancer. Next, we have MongoDB's Director of Engineering, Angela Shulman. Angela is originally from Pittsburgh and a 76th generation descendant of Confucius. Angela, that must have taken a lot of digging on Ancestry.com to find that out. Angela comes from MongoDB as the COO of MLab. Don Baker is the VP of Engineering at FitBit. Interestingly enough, Don's background is in occupational therapy. Don has lived in 7 states and backpacked at least 2 times a year. Don, I have to ask you really fast, what's been your favorite state thus far? And I'm throwing her on the spot. She did not know I was going to ask this.
I lived in New York City for 7 years, and New York City is that's the most fun I've ever had living anywhere. So I'd go back in a second.
Great food there. All right. Janaki is an engineering manager at Netflix and has been there for about 10 years. Janaki's female role model is Kiran Bedi, and I hope I'm saying that right, but she saw to reducing violence against women and reforming notorious jails. Janaki once camped across 4 states in 5 weeks. That is extremely impressive. Jessica joins this panel from Guild Education, a company that helps provide corporate education opportunities to employees. She grew up in Minnesota and now resides in Denver, Colorado. Jessica's female role model is Michelle Obama, which happens to be my personal female role model as well. Jess once took 8 months off to travel the world with her husband. And again, I have to ask, Jess, where is your favorite place you traveled?
India.
India, amazing. All right, Kara joins us from Cisco as the engineering director. She is a dance mom that spent 5 years as a single working mom. She came to love tech by way of her dad, who actually worked at IBM and exposed her to mainframes and key punches as a kid. I must be honest, Kara had so much to share with me that I could not actually even fit it all into this screen. Reading her personal bio and responses to all these prompts was my Sunday reading one morning over coffee, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Lena is MongoDB's very own CIO. She claims to badly play cello and loudly play thrash metal cello. Lena left school at the age of 16 and has worked in many different roles in her life, from shipyards to financial trading floors. She joins MongoDB 2 years ago. Xiao, which I found out means being good to parents, joins us from Instacart. I love the story Xiao told me about her mom, who grew up with no parents or electricity on her own in China. Despite all her mom went through, including having to once eat soap due to a lack of food. Her mom ended up in a senior role at a Big Five and is now retired and chasing her dream of being a writer. Zhao, I'd love to read her story once she releases a book. Sharmi Lee joins us as the VP of Engineering at Gap. She is married to another engineer and they have 2 boys in high school, both of which want nothing to do with the technology field. Previous to her current role, she spent 20 years at Walmart Tech. All right, that wraps up my speaking portion for today, and I will now pass it off to Pavi, one of MongoDB's senior software engineers who will actually be moderating today's panel. Take it away, Pavi.
Cool. Thanks, Brittany, for the great intro and introducing all these super great panelists. So as she mentioned, I'm currently a senior engineer on the core server replication team. I don't know if anyone saw my cat earlier, but she might come in the screen. Also, she was supposed to be napping, but you know, cats. I'm really excited to be able to have this conversation with everyone on the panel today. You all have accomplished so much in your careers and serve as an inspiration, especially to people like me who see themselves in this field for a while. So without further ado, let's get started. I know we have a few people here actually that have been at their respective companies for a while, and that's totally awesome. I'm just a little curious how you were all able to make sure there were growth opportunities for yourself after being at the company for such a long time. Sharmili, why don't we start with you?
Thank you, Pavi. And first, I want to say thank you for having me here. Really excited. And I agree, it's like a really, really awesome panel here. And the energy that comes out of this group is like unbelievable. Thank you. Thank you for having us here. Staying with the same company, and this is something that I get asked like so many different times. And like Brittany mentioned, I was with Walmart for almost 20 years, all in tech, but every 2 years almost, like clockwork, I moved around. Like either I would find something else to do or they would ask me to go do something else. And a company like Walmart, it's huge, right? And when you move from one area to another, you actually feel like you're in a totally different company, right? Because you are relearning some of the same things. And the couple of things that I've always looked at, either moving or doing something different, is number one, I always want to continue to learn. And number two, I always wanted to contribute. So it's not just about learning, but also wanted to contribute. So that way, when I kept moving around, it really laid the foundation for my career. I can say I have done so many different things. And when I came to Gap a couple of years ago, I got the opportunity to be responsible for everything that I had done, right? Like soup to nuts. So it really enhanced and it really helped me build who I am today. And so I would suggest it's like always look for what interests you. Just don't do things just because, like I've always wanted to do something, right? And sometimes also get out of the comfort zone. I think that's what makes a huge difference, right? It's like, just because I'm used to something and I want to stay in one place, if I had stayed there, I would have still become something. Definitely, I'm positive that I would have come to this role, but I would have been more focused on just one area. But now I feel like having that exposure to multiple different things has definitely helped me.
Yeah, I would have to add to that as well. I completely agree. I've been at Cisco for a long time. Before that, it was at IBM. Being able to move around, I mean, that's one of the benefits actually of being at a larger company, is I didn't have to leave the company to go try something new and different. And one of the amazing things being in the tech industry, it is always changing. There is always something to learn. You know, that it doesn't necessarily mean you have to move either company or group to be in that constant learn mode and growth mode. So, you know, as long as you're, exactly to Sharmili's point, I think as long as you're growing and learning and contributing, then, you know, it puts us all in a good place, I think, in terms of how we interact with other people and with our teams, and just trying to be better.
I would like to add on to what Sharmili and Kara already said, and I think you captured almost everything that I would want to say. I have been at Netflix for 10 years, and I have been an IC tech lead and manager for a while now. But the impact, I think what really drives me is how much impact I can make, how much I can learn. And as time grows on, also Sharmili and Kara said about contributing? How can you help others in your team also grow, give opportunities? And I think when you're early in the career, you are thinking what you can do to grow. At the same time, as you grow in your career, you also have an opportunity to have others shine. And I think it's a different level of satisfaction, which also is very helpful. And second, I know there are companies that are structured differently. At Netflix, I'm fortunate that we have a very flat organization. It doesn't have to have a role change. And I think it kind of probably is applicable to what Sharmali and Kara also said. It's you can pick what interests you and go deliver. So I led a team to reduce user-facing errors and improve the operational efficiency of the client. So it was not part of the job description, but it's an opportunity for you to learn and contribute. So I think at the end of the day, I think if you're able to still get up and excited to go to work and you're learning and contributing, I think that personal growth is different for different people. Some people, again, want to lead companies. Some people want to have a role which you are excited about. And I think you should acquire those skills to and see what can help you get there. But otherwise, if you are continuously growing, and that is growth personally for me, and that is what I have been able to accomplish staying at Netflix.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. Kind of like in a similar vein, I know like even though I've only been at MongoDB for 3 years, I'm kind of having like similar questions where I'm like, like, are there growth opportunities for me here? Or like, do I have to pursue those externally? And I think it's like a very real question. And sometimes, at least for me, I think this is kind of also tied to compensation. I feel like sometimes people are less likely to try something new if they think, their compensation might be affected by it, or if they're like, quote unquote, like not good at this skill yet, but like want to learn it. So I guess my next question is, how do you ensure that your compensation still stays competitive over time, even when you would like to like grow a certain set of skills? And I think Dawn and Amanda have some really good insight for this question. So why don't we start there?
Sure. Compensation, I think, is a tricky topic, and especially for women. It's very well accepted that women are not as likely to negotiate for themselves or push on increases in compensation, either while they're in a role or when they're changing roles. This has been a very difficult thing for me to do. I've gotten better at it over time. I'm not sure I would consider myself good at it, but I've definitely gotten better at it over time. I have made deliberate decisions in my career to take pay cuts because I wanted to learn something new. I changed from a server side, very infrastructure focused role, and I really wanted to learn the software realm. So I took about a 40% pay cut, and I went from being a vice president to being a program manager, individual contributor, QA release manager, just so I could get my foot into a company. It has paid dividends in my career. Now I'm 10 years later, 12 years later, it's paid off really well, but it's a gamble that I had to take to change that focus. And I've spent some time actually coaching other women on how to negotiate for themselves as they change roles as well. I think the first thing is make sure you know what you're comfortable with, right? Make sure you know, like, if I get to this dollar amount or this total package, then I will be satisfied. And you have to know that by also doing some research, competitive research. We live in an age where a lot of that information is available on Glassdoor, salary.com, whatever. You can go out and search and figure out where you're comfortable at. And always negotiate. If you get a package, you don't feel pressure to. Like, if you get an offer and you're like, that makes me really happy, don't feel pressure to negotiate. But always know that most people are negotiating at the offer stage, and it is expected that you will in most cases. And so it never hurts. If you don't ask, you don't get. So focus on a 10 to 20% more than you're being offered. And usually they'll meet you either for what you asked for or somewhere in between. And then you can feel good about going into the role.
Very well said. I actually agree with what Don mentioned. All I can add is just a couple of tactics here is basically you need to keep, understand the best negotiation is always win-win. So it's like you play cards. You need to know what the cards you have, what are the other cards, the others they hold. Then just the understand what is the best outcome for everybody to pull out of the negotiation, and then do the research as Don said, do the homework. Then don't need to think too much about it. Just do it every time. Just remind yourself of how, whether you feel comfortable or not comfortable, just do it. Then each time you actually might see something, certain things are predicted, something actually unexpected, then you just keep practicing and getting better at it.
I'd like to add something to what Amanda and Dawn said. I think there are also tools available these days, like levels.fyi, which people can go check what the market is paying. So yes, it is not accurate. Yes, it is not, there are so many things which goes on in what makes a good compensation, but at least there are data out there that people can use to learn what is the range, right? And also, this is, salary is very hard to talk about. And if you have a comfortable conversation with if you have a good relationship with your manager, you can also ask, hey, what went into setting this comp? Can you walk me through it? And what skills do I need to gain to move to the next level? And I think those are also like very direct questions you can ask to help gain you insight into making of the sausage.
I'll also add, I think that's great. And I'll also add that I think look at the total comp package, look at the benefits, look at the equity, look at the bonus, look at the base comp, because there might be other levers you might be able to negotiate on if you hit a maximum point on the base comp. And so I've seen a lot of people come in with different comparisons to say, hey, these are other benefits that you don't offer. This is why my base comp needs to be a little bit higher, or vice versa, which says, I'm good on the base comp. Can you offer more equity? Like if you're looking at a startup or you're looking at a smaller company, sometimes that can be helpful too. And I see people negotiate across all of those things. And so don't think that anything isn't negotiable. Don't take anything off the table. If it's not negotiable, they'll tell you it's not a negotiable, and that's fine. They'll say no. And then, I hire a lot of people, and I get really excited when women negotiate. I get really pumped up, and I'm like, yes, this is the kind of person I want on my team. Somebody that's going to stand up for themselves, somebody that's going to fight for what they deserve. And so I think, don't ever think it's going to be viewed as a negative. And if it is viewed as a negative, you probably don't want to work at that company.
Thanks, Jessica. This is such a great topic. I have something I want to share as well. I had worked at Uber Freight when I first started, and we have our department head. He's a guy, and he's so transparent. There was topic about female male comp. He literally published the data to all of us in our department for the male and female comp ratio at every level. People were just amazed by such a transparent leader. He literally, first time ever I've seen any leader just show the data at 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, male female, what the ratio is just. I've never seen that data at any department or company I worked at. I feel like that leader I would want to work with him anytime. Just he admit what our data is like, and then we can all see it and we can discuss about it. I don't know whether it's possible at all the company, but there was just once in a time ever I have seen that, so which was pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's a super great example to set. I respect that decision so much. I think a comp is especially sometimes regarded as kind of a taboo topic because it can make some people uncomfortable to talk about it. I actually think during my experience at MongoDB, just a little bit of background, I joined as what's called a new grad. So we're generally joining in a new grad class that has maybe 20 around 20 other recent grads that all join at the same time. So I've found people within my class that are comfortable sharing their comp with me. And that way I'm able to sort of make sure that I'm being like compensated fairly, if that makes sense. So I think like having people like that you can trust, and like, you know, like peers that are sort of similar to you in terms of like experience, like position and stuff like that, are sort of good like indicators of whether or not you're being compensated fairly. I do appreciate, Dawn, you being very honest about like having to take a comp cut, especially like for moving from like a manager position to like more of an IC position, and how this ultimately like serviced your growth. And I think that's awesome. I kind of want to dig deeper into that question about like choosing between like IC and manager tracks. And it does make me very happy to see that like you're still able to make those decisions like later in your career. I feel like sometimes I'm like, oh my God, if I choose one, like can I never go back to like the other? Like, is it going to be like weird if I go back to the other? And I know, Angela, you've been like thinking about this stuff more recently. So I was wondering if you could sort of speak to your thought process regarding that.
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to talk about it. First of all, I sort of wish it weren't called the IC track. I think it sounds a little bit like lesser when really it shouldn't be. You know, I think maybe I'll just talk about compensation a little bit, since that's what we've been talking about. Like I do think like in the last decade, I think, you know, unlike when I was young and starting my career, like I think in the last decade, like, you know, a lot of tech companies especially have formed, including MongoDB, have formed this like dual career track concept where, you know, there's equally as well-defined individual contributor tracks as managerial tracks. And that's huge, because then as you're looking at a company, you can, you can really dig into asking them about like, what are all the titles along each track, and, you know, perhaps even get a sense of compensation bands, and at least, you know, how equitable they are. And so I think now, like, you can really find companies where you can really thrive in an IC track, and there's no ceiling, you know. And I think you're right that I've been thinking about this a lot myself lately. Like I was, the reason I'm at MongoDB is that I had co-founded a startup that I worked at for 8 years before it was acquired a couple of years ago. And I think throughout my career, I've kind of gone back and forth from managerial and IC tracks. And, you know, I think when I was doing the startup, it became really, really clear to me that I kind of shied away from people management more. And when I think about why, I think some of it's about, you know, I think I just constantly want to go back into the trenches and work directly on the product and work directly with customers. I think also I had, you know, 2 young children in the last 10 years, and I think I've just really needed flexibility. And, you know, I think there's a lot of aspects of people management which are like by nature very synchronous. Like it requires a lot of synchronous, you know, interactions, like, you know, whether it's interviewing or one-on-ones or that kind of thing. And I think like I just have, you know, as I was at the startup wearing so many hats, like I was a product manager, I was, you know, writing a ton of code, I was, you know, running cloud operations, I was doing customer service. I think I just kind of kept leaning towards kind of the more flexible, asynchronous kind of work. And so now it's been a couple of years since our company was acquired, and I kind of, you know, I spent the last 2 years, my team and I, just kind of making sure the transition was smooth, but we're finishing that up now. And I'm now looking again at what I want to be doing. And I think I'm going to take a break from people management, and I'm happy to be at a company that seems to really value the IC track as much as the managerial track. Those are my thoughts.
So one thing I think about that also, I think we put barriers on ourselves against moving from a role in one company. It's a lot easier to change roles in the same company, but if you want to change companies, your resume is what puts you forward. When you're in the same company, people know you, and it's a bit easier. Those barriers are lower. But when you change companies, it becomes difficult to, if you want to change tracks, to have someone look at your resume for a track different than the one you're on when you're deciding to leave a company. And that's when the skills-based resume is your friend. You leave titles off your resume, and you talk about the skills you have and how you've applied them. And so when I changed back after being in management for many years and then wanting to change domains and learn a new domain, I did not put anything about management on my resume. Everything on my resume was about managing clients and how you do relationship management, program management, those sorts of things. And that is how I got in to talk to someone, because that is about how you get in the door to have a conversation. What happens after that is really irrelevant from your resume or your experience, right? It's how you manage yourself through that interview process. But don't be afraid. Don't feel like you have to tell all of the things about your history as you're looking to make changes. Tell the story you want to tell, and you can be honest without telling your whole story. And so tell the story that gets you to where you want to go.
That's great advice.
Yeah, I think that's super awesome, and sort of goes along the same theme of like really making sure that you're able to advocate for yourself in the workplace, especially because I feel like being underrepresented, I feel like sometimes, at least personally, I don't want to like overstep or, you know, like sort of like commit to things that I'm like not 100% confident that I can do. But I think like getting over this like fear of failure, for like lack of better phrasing, is sort of like the first step into like towards real growth. So I kind of, more recently, I've actually looked at or listened to a talk by Tanya Riley about like being glue, and sort of this reference to glue work that I feel like is sometimes overlooked in a lot of like performance reviews and things like that. So I guess like I want to talk about how people can leverage glue work and sort of like keeping the team, you know, like a well-oiled machine, how that can contribute to a performance review and actually like get you promoted, while also like trying to strike a balance between things like glue work and also maybe if you're an individual contributor, like your more technical work, if that makes sense. I think, Janaki, you had some experience here, if you'd like to share.
I would say have perspective, not necessarily direct experience. And I'm glad that you mentioned Tanya's article. I think she has written really well. I encourage everyone to look at the article. I think she probably answers all my thing. But I think what I want to say is that, you know, as leaders, at least for me, I'm in a position of power where I can have a change. And I think Netflix, again, is a company where compensation is not decided on one factor. We have a little bit more flexibility into what makes a person have the most impact. So it's a science. It's not a science. It's an art form. But I do take that into consideration for ensuring what makes a team successful. What, you know, there are all these soft skills which comes with working cross-functionally, making sure the team itself hums as a well-oiled machine. So these things definitely are taken into account when compensation is set. Say you are siloed, you're just doing a job, great, but it is not going to carry the weight that it will have if everyone works together or someone takes the initiative to make sure that the project gets completed and make sure they connect the dots and everything, right? So I think me being in a position of setting compensation, I think it's great. Number two is I think you know, setting expectations. I don't want the same person to be doing all the work all the time, the same work all the time. I think again, you know, I think by now in the industry, we have this regular one-on-ones. So it's a time for where I can talk to my ICs and ICs can talk to the managers to say, what kind of skills can I grow into, at least periodically, not every one-on-one, and say, hey, these are the things I would like to grow, or I can give projects where they can expand the scope a little bit that helps them gain the skills. So they are not bottled down to just doing the things just falling off the plate. And again, you know, Tanya has mentioned this, so I'm just going to quote her here. Say no if you're not getting compensated. You know, it's just like, if it's not valued and you're not getting compensated, you should just say, you know, let me do the work, which will gain the skills, and I'm not going to pick up the things that nobody is going to do. So that's my perspective.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, if I could add into that, the other thing that we do with Glue, or we call it background tasks. A lot of what we do with our background tasks is use it to both help someone in terms of learning a new skill set maybe they didn't have in the past, also for cross-training. You know, we never want to be in a position where someone can't go on vacation. You know, I am like the poster child for vacation. So we want to make sure that everyone has a chance that when they get out of the office, they can really be out of the office, unlike what we've had in the last year with COVID. But on a normal vacation, that they can go away, they can shut off, they're not going to get the text from someone back in the office because they're the only ones who know how to do something, right? That's a really bad position to be in on a long term. So we do try to make sure that we cross-train using those background tasks, and absolutely people do get credit for the fact that they can then fill in when someone is gone, and you know, very often that's a save the day kind of a moment, right, where the primary person may be gone, they're out on vacation for a week, something just hit the fan, and you know, you need somebody to step in and do whatever that thing is, yay rah, right? So we do absolutely try to take advantage of that with our folks and let them know the skills that they can pick up by just, you know, picking up some other areas and learning in the background.
I think as well, it's a really important point you're making there, and what I've tried to do at MongoDB anyway is use that kind of collaborative enthusiasm to help spread the load amongst the teams. So security is one of those strange groups that touches everything, and you know, people are very interested in learning more about it. And I think just having this kind of collaborative method of, you know, we've set up a security champions program where people can actually join and give 1 or 2 hours a week of their time to learn more about security and be the champion for their group. And you know, it just shows us as a company all these different people who have so much more to add than just their day-to-day work. And I think just having the freedom to explore that is very important. So that's, you know, it's one of the many reasons I love working here.
Yeah, awesome. Kara, I really resonate with what you said about, like, you know, sometimes I feel like, especially in engineering, it's really easy to sort of rely on like this one super important person that like has had a lot of institutional knowledge because they've been at the company for so long, and it's like very easy for people to sort of like treat them as like a source of truth almost. But I recently just went through like a period on my team specifically where a lot of our senior engineers had switched to a different team. So it's kind of like on like the more junior engineers to sort of step into their place and, you know, take over their roles for them. And that actually ended up in a recent promotion for me. So, you know, like I feel like in those opportunities there is definitely like room for growth, and that's how we get better. So I'm really glad to hear you speak about that. Janaki, I'm also glad that you brought up the whole idea of saying no, because this ties in pretty nicely into our next question. Lena, I know that you've had to play a lot of different roles in your career. So I'm really interested to see how you were able to like manage and protect your time without feeling the pressure to sort of like say yes to everything. I feel like, especially in engineering, especially in the beginning of your career, you're often rewarded and like promoted for, you know, saying, yes, you can do this thing. Yes, I can pick up this thing. But I feel like at some point when you have like more responsibilities, it gets like impossible to juggle so many tasks at the same time. So you do have to learn how to say no. And I'm also in the process of learning how to do that. So I would love advice in that.
Thanks. So there's some really good points being raised here. It is one of the more difficult things to do. That and compensation, I'd say, are two of the most difficult things to tackle as, you know, as anybody in any industry. But I think the way that I did it, and I think the way that I got on, was I would say yes when I was asked, not all the time. So my boss knew that I wasn't a completely soft touch, but generally, if they would ask me, for example, one day I walked into the office, this is when I worked in London and I worked in a private bank, and the boss kind of stood up. It was very London, you know, early 90s, everyone wore suits and ties, and, you know, it was, and so I was one of the few people who actually was in a technical role. Anyway, so the boss walks in one day and he says, who wants to go to Japan? And I just put my hand up. I was like, I'll go. And, you know, went home, got my passport, flew to Japan and worked there for a couple of months. I loved it. And that kind of definitely propelled me forward. So that was a fun yes. But sometimes you don't have any choice. Sometimes you're expected to say yes. And you kind of know when you're in that situation. And the few times that I've been in that situation, I've said, I have two things to ask you, boss. Why are you asking me? And is it because no one else wants to do it? And usually they're pretty, my bosses were pretty honest, not as transparent as some of the people that sounds as though you've worked for here, but they were pretty honest and said, yeah, nobody else wants to do it. And we know that you can do it. So it's kind of a, you know, an attestation to your strength, which, you know, buy that if you want. But it definitely helped move forward. It helped me move forward. But now with the way that I manage time, first of all, I'm incredibly lucky to have an assistant, Dawn Charles. She runs my calendar. But one of the things that we do try and do, and this is within engineering, within MongoDB, is we have no meetings Wednesdays, which kind of works. But it's really important to have that one day just to catch up on paperwork, or, you know, I'm trying to relearn Python and stuff like that. So it's like, I just want some time to learn and just stop the noise and stop the Zooms. So it's having the latitude to do that. But then I'm also very regimented the rest of the week. You know, I'll have meetings, I'll have time to catch up between meetings. One good thing I just discovered in Google is speedy meetings. So instead of half an hour and an hour, you have 25 minutes and 50 minutes. That 5 minutes, it means I can go to the bathroom. It means I can get a cup of tea. I'm British, we drink tea all day. And it just, I mean, it's open, it sounds weird, but it's taken a lot of stress off of me. Just something as silly as getting 5 minutes back at the end of a meeting. It's just like, okay, now I can prepare myself for the next one. But I'd say you have to have, you know, a good regimen in place so that you can do the work that you have to do in the time you've allotted. Don't get sucked down the YouTube hole watching Keanu Reeves videos, which I could do all day.
I would definitely like to add something, and I appreciate Lena for stating everything that you said, because I agree with every one of them. The one thing that I would also, that I have been able to be successful most of the time is writing down what are my non-negotiables, understanding that these are my non-negotiables, and at no cost, I'm going to give up on any of those. And then understanding also, to her point about, is this really going to help me? Is this really going to grow me? Am I going to actually enjoy doing it? That's also important, because we spend most of our time like working, right? And if we don't enjoy what we are going to be doing, then it's okay to say no, right? And I think that's what if we put ourselves in that situation and ask the question, what are my non-negotiables? Am I going to enjoy this? Is this going to be in the way for anything else that I'm interested in? Just go ahead and straight say no.
I would agree with that. I have a couple things that I try to write down too, which is like, get clear on what my long-term goals are. And then be honest with myself where my growth areas are, and vet those opportunities against those things to say, hey, is this going to get me where I need to go? And do I truly have some growth in this area? Because if I do, then maybe saying yes to that is a really great idea. If I don't, then saying no probably is a good idea, but then making it clear to your boss or your manager, hey, this is why I'm saying no, because it's not where I'm headed. It's not a growth area for me. It could even be, I'm not going to enjoy this. This isn't the type of work that I enjoy. And I know if I'm enjoying my work, I'm more productive. But one thing that I've been really working on too is you start to realize in this always on environment we're in, that it's really on you to set your own boundaries. And I struggled with that. I sort of kind of left it up to everyone else, that they would start to dictate my entire calendar. They would dictate all of the things I was doing. And I felt very powerless for a while. And I felt like maybe I can't be in this job because I can't handle it. And I don't feel like I have power, until I sort of switched my point of view, which is it's on me to set these boundaries. And I think, Sharmali, we're getting at that with sort of, what are my non-negotiables? I think, in this day and age, nobody's going to set those boundaries for you, and you really need to do that. I think, Kara, you mentioned something about the vacation time and really making sure people have that. There are managers that really help or companies that are really great with that, but sometimes they're not. And so you're going to really have to set where your boundaries are. And I think once you get clear on that, I think it's easier to make that no or yes decision.
Yeah, agree with that, Jessica. I think you guys covered all the points I want to say. Just want to also provide some tips for folks on how to do that. I feel like these days I say no every day, like to many people, to my peers, to my manager, to my reports. I think to me, I found what works is not just say no, but also say why. Like, why am I rejecting this meeting? Why am I moving to next week? I told them, no, this with perf calibration, I really don't have time. I'm behind on writing my perf. Like, can we meet next week? I say, is this urgent? If it's not urgent, can we meet the week after? Because this is what I have on my plate. Be vulnerable. Like, I'm like really behind on something, and something is really burning, so that they can understand. Also be principled and disciplined on why. Like, for example, one thing, like recruiter also schedule a lot of interviews for me. I get like every day, sometimes twice a day. I told them, no, like I think my time is probably best used to interview senior platform manager. Interviews for junior engineers, maybe all my managers can take that. So I will say no and tell them this is my principle, and then this is why I'm doing this, and so they will know. So they will not keep on scheduling. They will follow what I wanted them to do. So this is why I try to, so they will not feel rude. I'm always just being a very rude person. The reality is I'm not rude. I'm just I can't do it all, and unless I don't sleep. So to my this is to peers, and to my reports the same. So sometimes I have some reports, they will ask everything. Hey, I want this opportunity, I want to do this. And then some other people are quiet, they don't ask for anything. So it's not okay to say yes. And then they will give all the opportunity to this one person who keep on asking everything. They want everything they can see. And then just as I become more senior, I have to be strong. I can't say yes. Then people just find out, they just ask Xiaohei, she just say yes. And then I just cry and ask, and then she'll give me everything, more comp, more promotion, more opportunity. It's not okay to be a manager as weak. I think this is weak. And same thing for upper manager. I used to be a very yes person. So I don't want to stereotype people, but I grew up in Asian culture. We are like, we tend to say yes to the hierarchical. And it took me a while to say no to my boss. Normally when I say no, I'm already 1 foot out. I can't bear this anymore. Then I learned, okay, this might not be good, because like I should probably say no. And then if I just leave suddenly, it'll be weird. And I just learned all this weakness on me. And then it's like I try to push myself. No, you got to like have a debate and say no to your boss before like you just like quit. And then so it's very hard in all degrees to say no to upper, downwards, left and right. So I think literally I practice this every day and try to do better. Yeah.
Very well said. I actually second what you ladies just said. All I want to add is also I think things are changing, so stay open-minded and be flexible about certain things. Definitely understand the boundaries, and also understand the others, right? People work with you up, or your peers and the people you manage, and understand each people's boundaries, and also help everybody understand each person's style. So then you will feel actually more comfortable when you say no. The other people might understand. Then you actually don't feel really that kind of the pressure, awkward to say no. And in the meantime, also things are always changing given different situations. So we also need to be more adaptable to certain situations. Then from time to time, actually, you find that things get more and more smooth as you work with everybody.
I just have a quick thing to add, which is that like when someone asks you to do something, like just you don't have to reply right away. Like take some time to think about it and formulate your answer properly. Like there's no rush.
Totally, that's a great. I also learned that is get from time to time. I will say, oh, let me think about it, or tell me more and think about it. Oh, I will sleep on it, and I will get back to you tomorrow. because my own instinct is always, okay, let's do this. let's conclude it, all right? Make the decision just right now. But on the other hand, I keep reminding myself, and I'm become more used to, even I know the answer, exactly the answer, but I will say, oh, let me sleep on it, and I will get back to you tomorrow.
And so
the only other thing I would want to add to that is that we all go through different seasons of life. There's a time when, when my kids were younger and I had gotten a divorce and I was a single mom. I had a 6-year-old and a 9-year-old, and I had things at home that I had to absolutely take care of. There wasn't somebody else around. My family was all in another state, and I had some hard and fast rules that I needed to stick by because I had family that I had to deal with. And, especially as a female, you don't want to use your family as an excuse, because that's, that really looks bad as well, right? So the only thing I would say is just be personally aware of where you are in your season of life. If you know that you have, aging parents, that they're going to need some time of yours to help them to get into a state where they need to be, or you've got young kids at home and you need time with your kids at home, don't take on everything new at the same time. Be thoughtful of when are the times that you can take on the extra stress of a new job, stress of a new area, time that you can travel or not travel. Don't put yourself in a hugely stressful situation because you're not mindful of your whole being, everything that's going on in your life at the time. And saying no to something today doesn't mean you're saying no to it tomorrow, right? Leave that discussion open to say, right now is not a time for me to take on a job with a lot of travel, but I would love to be able to do something like that in the future. You can leave the discussion open and know that you're open to that in the future, but right now is not a good time. It's okay to do that.
I think the reverse is also true. If you say yes to something, there's a question in the discussion about this. If you say yes to something and then find like, oh my God, I actually can't get this done.
I think that's why it's always best to say no and then think about it.
Right. But if you find yourself in a situation where you just have had more stuff piled on than you can handle, then you have to decide, what are the things you want to do? What commitments do you want to keep? And then who are you going to disappoint, and go back and tell them as soon as you know. Bad news doesn't get better with age. So just let people know as soon as possible. And even better, if you can find someone else that can take it on instead of you, and you save whoever the requester was from having to find someone else, that just sets you up for being seen as really responsible and accountable for something like that as well.
Yeah, I agree. If someone says yes all the time and don't deliver, I think the trust is gone, that they're not reliable.
Yeah, you only go through that a couple of times and you don't ask them anymore, and that, that's not a good situation to be in. That's a good point.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that conversation around that question. I really like when panels like this end up like producing a lot of organic responses. So it's really cool to see that we're all like, going through the same issues, and we all have interesting ways and like novel ways, at least, to deal with it given our situations. I do want to get to one of the questions in the Q&A because I think it ties in nicely to one of the questions that I was going to ask anyway. But this person, Sandra, had asked, what are your thoughts on having and making space for trans women and non-binary people in tech? We often end up between the cracks when it comes to fitting into groups and empowerment. Yeah, and I think just in general, like, how do we make sure we're making the space as inclusive as possible? And beyond that, ensuring that like we're able to retain, more diverse employees. Because I feel like, in my opinion, it's not just enough to like recruit people, but we also have to make sure that they feel like they have a place at the company, and that they can continue to grow in their positions.
So from that perspective, I think one of the really important things to look for is a company that has employee resource groups. And it doesn't matter which bucket you fit into in the world of underrepresentation. Knowing that those resource groups exist tell you a lot about a company and that they make space for that. And finding out how active those groups are and what they contribute to the company culture is really important, and how sponsorship for them works in the company. Those things all tell you a lot about the company and how they engage in their diversity and inclusion initiatives. From a making space, it's really, again, super important to figure out a company that the company culture you work in, or you would like to work in, or you're interviewing for, it values the contributions of people above all else, right? That it is about knowing what that people will contribute regardless of anything else about them. And your interview panel will also tell you about that. Always remember, you are interviewing the company as much as they are interviewing you, and find out a bit about the folks that are interviewing you, and ask questions that can lead you to answers that tell you whether it's a good place and a place that'll make space for you.
That's great, Dawn. I think those are really good pieces of advice as far as looking at what different companies support internally. I know that we've had this discussion a lot internally at our company, within tech and then broadly. But one of the things, Pavi, you pointed out is it's not just about recruiting. It's about the ways that you're making your organization more inclusive. And so are there initiatives going on within that organization to raise awareness about inclusivity? Are there different employee resource groups that are focused on that? At Guild, we've done some things even within tech. We've created some inclusivity groups to send out a newsletter every 2 weeks to talk about tips about how you might be able to be more inclusive, or things you're doing that you don't even realize aren't inclusive, just so we can start to raise awareness on a regular basis. Because sometimes you need to get people up to speed. Everybody's on their own journey when it comes to DE&I and how much time and effort they put into that. And so you have to realize that everybody's at different levels. And so finding a place that continues to reinforce that, continues to educate, and then has some of those supportive groups, I think is a really good sign that might be a place where you won't feel as much like you'll slip through the cracks, because I think this is an ongoing journey that our community and companies are working through, and we're not there yet. I think it's just going to continue to be something that we all have to be thoughtful about.
Yeah, I totally agree with all the Dawn and Jessica mentioned, emphasized on the cultural aspect. So it's actually quite challenging. It's not an easy task at all. I think from my own experience, I always feel it's very important to make sure everybody can have voices. So not like, in the technical discussions, for example, not only just some people talk a lot or have a loudest voice or have a title, they actually can have the voices to have their, make their recommendations, right? It's a good idea when it's not about, really the title. And if you lead by example, actually people feel very much actually join into it. And also, not only just different underrepresented groups, and also given different people's personalities. So sometimes, some people tend to be more quiet. They are introvert. They don't feel like they have a chance to make themselves feel like they are heard, their opinions. I always actually, I would say, okay, let's use a Google Doc, right? Then we can actually have whatever they contribute to their ideas and the suggestions. Then, not only just people know how to talk, then really the people actually can help, we can come up with good ideas all together. And then, be very transparent, be fair and objective. There's, there's a very clear expectations. So people feel actually quite motivated. And also it's also very important. I think one of the important attribute is that everybody is they need to feel they are growing, right? That's a very fulfilling feeling for them. So if we provide the learning and the coaching opportunities for everybody, then people actually feel, wow, this is the place I can really work and grow myself and get the help, then that's always the best to have this help eventually build and grow this inclusive culture.
I can add, to answer to specifically the, Sandra's question. I think Dawn and Jessica, Amanda mentioned finding the ERGs. We have having a community. The LGBTQ and I community definitely is a good place to start. The other part is that finding people in the finding managers working with the company who is already aware and have thought about inclusion and not really as an add-on. I think it really helps. And at Netflix, I have seen some really good examples set on how, when someone transgender comes out, how they are introducing them to the group, and starting from pronouns and how do you engage with the person as a whole person and make them feel comfortable. And as Jessica was saying, sending inclusive news articles and having the entire company or the groups you're working with being aware and available, having the space for the person who is person to be feeling included, and making sure that the awareness is raised for others to create an inclusive place, I think is something that you should look for. And I think if you're looking for a job, or make sure that you're also interviewing. I think Dawn covered many points very well at ERG. See the panel, ask some questions about where the company is in the journey of inclusion and what the group is doing in terms of inclusion. And that will give you a very good idea if it's a good fit for you or not.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Jessica, I think I'm definitely going to try to steal your idea about like the newsletter. And I just think that really resonated with me about like, sometimes it's not that like people are like malicious, but it's more like they don't even know like where to start, like accessing this information, while also at the same time, they don't want to like say the wrong thing. And that like fear also like sets them back a little bit. But yeah, the really great answers all around. I'm just going to move through the next couple Q&A questions. We have a couple on salaries that I think are all kind of related that maybe we can answer at the same time. What can I do if I did not negotiate in the beginning? And how can I ask for a raise like 1 to 2 years down the line? And I think this is kind of related to like, does salary vary with age and stuff like that?
Yeah, so if you find yourself, a lot of companies today, not all of them certainly, but a lot of them will make market adjustments. You are in a company that is addressing compensation fairly when that happens. Much to my delight, it happened to me for the first time about 6 years ago. It had never happened to me before, where I suddenly had more money in my paycheck and I had no idea why, and had to go to my boss and say like, well, what happened? Like, oh, it's just a market adjustment, and that happens, periodically. Like, wow, that's amazing. So knowing that whether you're in a company that does that or not is useful. And then you can, especially if you're in tech, you're in a position to vote with your feet. So if you go and you talk with your boss and you say, I know that my peers in other companies, or even in this company, are more highly compensated than I am, and I feel like I'm maybe at a disadvantage for not changing roles. I'd really like to stay here. And so I wonder if there's an adjustment in compensation that we can make so that that issue that I'm having gets addressed, because all other things being equal, I'd prefer to stay here. And if they say no, you say, well, I really appreciate the information that you've given me, and being honest with me about it so that I can make the best decisions for me going forward. And which doesn't mean you're necessarily going to leave the company, but definitely leave them with the feeling that you appreciate the honesty, you know where you stand, and now you have the information you need to make the decision.
Yeah, agree with Dawn. I think agree with what you have said. I think something I can add it. I feel like appreciate the employees who tell me they're concerned about their compensation. I had this conversation with one of like my most senior like staff engineer, and he told me that he's like thinking about the compensation. So actually, I put in my HR partner. We did a compensation review for him. It turned out he didn't understand some of the year-over-year compensation works after 4 years. So he thought it would drop. So we did a very transparent review, like on everything. It turned out he felt okay. And then he also told me like the job is not just about compensation, it's all about also about how he can go further. He also has some freedom in contributing to the open source community, and those are also important. So I think it really helped us to build trust together. He told me that you were the first manager who willing to sit down and then put HR like look at the compensation for ongoing for the next few years. He really appreciate. He said like no other manager has done this for him before. And I told him I also really appreciate that you told me that you're thinking about not happy. Otherwise, I wouldn't know. So I couldn't even done this, and then you might just leave, and then I would be so sad. So like I think it's healthy to have such conversations. So don't be afraid to do so, and your manager will also appreciate.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for taking the time out of your probably super busy schedules to sort of give your insight about your experiences in this industry. I certainly found it very helpful. And yeah, I just, again, want to thank you all for being here.
Yeah, and I'll second that. I really appreciate each one of you being here, and everybody who attended. I hope you leave today with something that you've gained some sort of knowledge from one of these women or all of them. And we will be sending out the recording, and I will share the slide deck also so that you guys can learn more about each individual person here, since we didn't get much time to go through that slide deck. But again, everyone, thank you so much. And we will hope to see everyone again very soon. Bye, everyone.
Thanks
Bye.
so much for hosting.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.